I didn't know why we had it sitting there. Now we know.
Yeah, Ustream is live now.
So I don't know who she has it
gosh.
with.
Thank you, sir.
Do they have
Thank you,
different
thank you.
rules? What they'll allow? Should we find out?
Yes, we will. Then Henry, I got to get my music up. Hi, everybody. We're over here on this camera. This camera here is Ustream Live. That's the international thing there. So we're there with that. He's going to be doing I got to get this. So put these headphones on. I'm going to go over the top of that doohickey. Yeah. And then you can come into this as.
Tell me.
Yeah, and you have to be close as you can to this.
Okay.
Tell me when you can hear something in your headphones. Anything yet? Okay. Is she 3? 4? Okay. Take those tunes off, Henry. I don't know how to.
You can start talking.
Okay. Start talking into your microphone.
Yeah.
Just introduce her and talk to her.
Yeah, just start talking. All right. Thanks, Henry.
Start talking to her. She's on that camera.
Oh,
There's only one camera on you.
got you. So we're on the Facebook Live camera. This is Jenny Adams, and stay as close to that as you can, Jenny. We're going to get started with our show here in just a minute. As soon as I figure out how to work the clicker and the screen and everything. I'll give you some announcements, everybody. The NFL, I'm going to talk a little bit about the NFL. I'm going to introduce Jenny here formally in just a second. And as we do that, let me bring up our little song here that we have every show. It's about breathe, and because you're a high performer, you want to make sure you breathe and you do the things that are right and functional for you, and breathing helps that, especially when you get challenged with things like, I got no place to go, nowhere to hide, and we're going to try to make sure that we stay focused. I'm going to turn down that in here and make sure that everybody on the Facebook Live scene has that, and I'll turn that down a little bit and let you guys know that the NFL is doing some really great stuff, and I want to make sure that we understand why we're talking about the NFL today, and because we're talking about abuses. Well, here's the opposite side of this. When you do things to help people who typically get abused, and one of those groups of people that are in the news these days are women, our girls, our daughters, our moms, our aunts, And the NFL is doing some things. They're doing what they call In the Huddle. It's a women's summit for young women during the Super Bowl week. So they're doing some things to raise awareness, bring women in to talk about issues. They've got a great lineup, actually. They've got executives from ESPN coming in to talk. They've got people from the NFL, women from the NFL that are going to come in and talk about any number of issues about privilege and probably power, how to manage power and be focused on that. So that being said, the next subject I want to bring in is the finalists for the Walter Payton Award. One of them, you've got to know that J.J. Watt is going to be one of those people, and Greg Olson, they're finalists, and a third finalist is Benjamin Watson. Those three guys have all done just amazing things. Greg Olson's with the Carolina Panthers. Ben Watson, he's with the Baltimore Ravens, and you all know that J.J. Watt, he's from Texas. He's the Houston Texans, and amazing work. My call is like it's not obvious that J.J. Watt is going to be the guy. He's going to be picked for the NFL Walter Payton Award recipient this year. So that's our intro for the show today. This is 360 Mindset on KUHSdenver.com. And it would help if I turn mics up, wouldn't it? That'd be great, so that everybody can hear me. That's amazing. It's amazing what's going on here. And Henry just said to me this morning before the show, I'm putting out fires, I'm running all over the place, and here I am, one of the fires. I created one of the fires. So let me just repeat it again about J.J. Watt. That's my prediction. He's going to be the Walter Payton Award-winning final. He's going to win the award of Man of the Year for the NFL. But the NFL is also doing some great stuff in putting together a women's summit. They're calling it the In the Huddle Women's Summit for young women during Super Bowl week. And they've got a lot of great gatherings of women from ESPN, from the NFL, in different capacities. The chief marketing officer for the NFL, Dawn Hudson, she was quoted as saying, we have the privilege of once again using our biggest platform, the Super Bowl, to convene a conversation about the advancement of women on and off the field. Now, I like that, the advancement of women. We're focusing a lot on the negative side, which we should be aware of that, but the advancement of women is bringing it to a positive place. And she continues to say, we want the young women attending and about to embark on their own careers to hear insights from leaders across the industry and be inspired to dream big.
That's awesome.
I love that. So here we are today talking about the Me Too movement and finding a champ within. So we take a positive step at engaging what women do and how great they are. I wouldn't be here without a woman, I'm telling you, because my mom, she was the center of that. God bless her soul. But we all have a woman in our lives in some capacity, and I think from a man's perspective, we have to have a better understanding of what that means. And to do that, I brought in a colleague and quickly becoming a great friend, Jenny Adams. She is the founder of Access Granted, located in Fort Collins. We're also going to talk about Jenny's experience at dealing with and seeing and hearing about abuses towards and with women, so that we can make a kind of sense of what's our role, whether you be a man, a woman. What is our role in handling and understanding those abuses towards genders? As I've said countless times, it's not about women specifically. It's about power and privilege, because the power and privilege abuses that happen don't involve just women. It's women with women. It's men and men and women together. One of the most dramatic examples of those abuses and types of abuses like that, man with girls in this case, is the U.S. women's gymnastics team. And over my shoulder, you can see some of the women showcased at the court hearing of Dr. Lasser, who has now been he's been sentenced with over 150 years. 150 years. Think that's enough? The time frame is always interesting, but 150 years seems like enough to show this gentleman that what he did and how he took advantage and abused these young women is a serious offense. However, that being said, we're also going to talk with Jenny about strategies. And I mean, how did this happen without people finding out about it? It was years and years. These young women are now in their 20s, mid 20s, and some of them still in their late teens. But over 150 of them came forward and spoke out and said things about their feelings. And Allie Rassman was one of those who spoke out. And she said this. She says, "I'm here to face Larry so you can see I've regained my strength, that I'm no longer a victim, I'm a survivor. I'm no longer that little girl you met in Australia where you first began grooming and manipulating." I think those are eloquent words, very precisely selected, because she could have gone a little bit more structured in her violent response to him and her anger. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and with the help of Jenny Adams. As I said, Access Granted founder. Her experience in the past as a professional was, as I said in our promo, she is an engineer by training, but a atypical engineer. Because now you're working and moving forward on building your business around awareness, building awareness. You have your own methods for doing it. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So good morning, Jenny.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you come down from Fort Collins to see us here in North Glen. It's awesome. Talk to me a little bit about what your experiences have been regarding your emotional health and well-being, your spiritual health, as you've come through the experiences you've gone through as a woman, as a mom, as a partner, and there's some ebbs and flows there. So give our audience a little bit of background about where you approach the abusive behaviors and the emotions that go around those kind of things.
Sure. I'm just trying to figure out where to start.
Yeah. Yes.
In society, we've been taught that it's not safe to be a woman.
Yeah.
And it's not safe to have sexuality, and it's not safe to be outspoken. It's not safe to have a voice. It's not safe to be seen. It's just not safe to be a woman. And the first thing that I had to do was find safety in that. And in order to do that, I had to go through a lot of personal growth and looking inside myself to figure out how to get there.
Now, in the roles that you've had over the years, did that looking inside, did it come quickly to you as a revelation, or was it a slow process? And what kind of people and things did you face that were obstacles to that?
Sure. So the biggest change that happened was I was laid off and divorced in the same week, 4 days apart.
Geez, that's easy. Piece of cake.
Ended up being one of the best weeks of my life because it was the start of that trajectory. And when that happened, I realized I didn't have anyone from the outside to give me the answers, because in the past it had all been coming from society and from my bosses and from my spouse and from everybody else except for myself, because as a woman I was never taught to have my own voice. Even though growing up my dad always told me I could be anything I wanted. He never held me back, but society did. And going through that experience of my whole life changed in 4 days, and I had to go figure out what that looked like and what made me happy, and that was the first time I got to focus on myself. So that was 20 years into my career and being an adult. And so when you say, did it come slowly or quickly, and it came very slowly, and then all of a sudden it was fast.
Yeah. Well, because you're unfettered a little bit. I mean, kind of some mental and emotional obstacles were removed for you, I'm imagining. I'm guessing you dealt with some anger and some emotions.
Absolutely.
And who did you draw upon to kind of work through those feelings? I mean,
sure. The first thing I had to do, as I said earlier, was find safety, and that took at least a year just to find safety in being myself. And then I went to a class called the Mama Gina School of the Womanly Arts, which is in New York City, and it was by far better than both my college degrees put together. And it allowed me to give myself permission to be feminine, to allow men to be masculine. It allowed me to look at my own pleasure and my own turn on, and really to love myself
Yeah.
from every ounce of being a woman.
You know, I don't want to. I'm going to start a conversation that compares things, because no matter what you're doing in life, you know, the career thing or working at home or whatever, there's emotions and there's environments. We'll talk a little bit in the mental conditioning segment about environment's influence on who you are and what you do and how you feel. In athletics, everything happens fast. You know, it's different than the work life. And those emotions, that's why I like analyzing athletics, is because you got to be turned on. You got to be ready to go and bring your passion for the sport into a focus point to deliver. That's where we're talking about mindset right now. What is the mindset? How did you overcome the anger and the fear and the frustrations and the shame or the guilt, whatever happens within what we're talking about now, about the feminine side of things. And I've talked to players about this all the time, about you've got to get in touch with your feminine side to be masculine enough to make a great tackle, or powerful enough to make a good hit on the ball. And it's that rhythm, that sensitivity, that
feeling into your body.
Yeah, and it's not until they get to be older players that they really start getting a sense of that. And I think that's a shame. So one of the things I want my listeners on the athletic side, the competitive side of our discussions, is to learn from you is, okay, this is someone who's gone through some traumas that are no less diminished to what you may go through as a failure on the field. The emotional responses are very much the same. You've gotten some resolve. You've had some resiliency tests for yourself that are perhaps even higher, but equal to the way you address them as athletes. And our metaphoric example today is the women gymnastics team and the resiliency they had to come through. And in this mindset area, as a college student, because I'm going to ask you to talk about that because of the story about Aziz Ansari and what the NCAA is starting to do now with changing the definition around sexual assault and using terms like affirmative consent. It's not just saying no or saying yes. It's because the interactions are not just in an intimate setting where you may be overwhelmed with alcohol or drugs and somebody takes advantage of you. Now it could be you're just getting pestered as you walk to class. You know, it's more than just being whistled at as you walk through campus. It's guys that, in this Ansari's case, he didn't back off, and he should have. So he's gotten condemned a little bit and pointed a finger at. So when you were in college, what was it like in college? Did you find yourself dealing with those fears but not knowing what to do with them?
Yeah, absolutely. The way you describe it, it's hard as a woman to even put it into words. It's like we're taught to not speak up, and when we're taught that there's expectations by men, especially around sex, and we feel obliged to do that.
Yeah.
And it's taught by the social means, it's taught by the media, it's taught in the movies. That's just how it is. And so we think that's part of what life is. But it's not. And it wasn't until recently that I learned that it's really masculine to say no, and it's feminine to say yes. And so when when a woman's in her feminine, she's going to say yes, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to switch back over to the masculine. And when the masculine isn't saying no for the woman,
I get you.
It creates this sense of insecurity in a woman, and she keeps saying yes, even though she's really internally saying no.
Well, because the circumstances may have changed. I mean, from a guy's perspective, we see the setting and the environment. So something has changed because the woman is now, the feminine side is now kind of projecting itself out and saying, hold on a minute. Earlier, I was kind of acting and behaving in a yes mode, but now I'm getting a little fearful. Things are going a little differently. And this, I think, is the basis for why the NCAA is changing their definition to be more attuned to when does yes start to convert to a no from the feminine perspective, but the guy doesn't get it.
Exactly. There's a phenomenon lately that's called a cuddle party, which a lot of people are like, what is a cuddle party? In my journey over the past few years, I've tried everything. I've tried so many things for personal growth because I needed to find what worked because it was
Yeah.
not an option to not feel good.
Yeah.
I needed to feel good. And one of the things I tried was these cuddle parties. And the best thing at the beginning, if you have to find a facilitated one by a trained facilitator, is they teach you how to say no. And they teach you how to say yes. And they teach you how to ask.
Well,
Specifically,
I need this for my football players.
that you can hire someone that's a trained facilitator, and even if they just come in for just that part of it, it is amazing.
Is there a part of the country where that is more prevalent? I mean, you can find them more quickly. I mean, or
There's
not?
actually a website out there for cuddle parties that
Right.
have the trained facilitators on there, and it's, from what I looked at, it was everywhere.
So I'm guessing that those might be so that you don't go beyond the cuddle. Like
Everyone's clothed, and
yeah.
and you ask, like asking if you can touch their arm is different than asking if you can rub their arm.
Yeah. Or like, when we first met, can I hug you? May I hug you? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And getting permission to do that, and then
Exactly.
moving from there in a gradual way. So I'm very interested in this part because the mindset of athletes many times when they come off of in fact, this is a supposition on my part, the more violent the sport, the less attuned they are once they're not in the sport to do and understand the cuddle differences. Like a football player, they're still a guy. Mm-hmm. And if their choice, and regardless of whether their orientation is hetero or homosexual, doesn't matter. There's still the desire there. So they get done with this sport. They've been banging and hitting people, and they want some niceness. Yeah. They want some attention, and they don't know how to go get that because they're coming down from this violent space.
If they can tune in to where they are when they're about to tackle someone and they're not allowed to tackle their head, they can't hit their head directly. They have to control themselves to do that, and it's practice to get it right, but they have to control themselves, and they know how to do that.
Yeah,
it's the exact same thing with women.
That's a good point, because I tend to talk to guys, and I say guys in particular because of the more like football, basketball. Women are not playing those sports, or they play basketball, but the technique of getting in touch with that nuance of knowing where you're at in a moment where you're trying to just like drive right through this guy, that takes practice, because it's easier to get it all amped up and just let it go.
Exactly.
No thinking once you start it, just let it go. And that's not very intimate.
No, but just think how much better of a football player you are when you can do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
At the snap of a finger. And if you can read a woman's energy in the same way, it takes practice.
Yeah.
But that's all it is energy.
Yeah.
There's a fine-tuned energy that she gives off when she switches from her true yes to a no.
Yeah.
Even though she may still be saying yes.
I'm going to say this, but it's not difficult. I just hesitate to say it. Guys don't get that.
It's practice. Well, they can get it.
Well, but I mean, I'm not talking about the getting, but yeah, that part about the guys understanding their sensitivities. I'm talking about what you mentioned about the woman knowing when the yes is the genuine yes and not a no. That the guys read that.
Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of practice.
And so that's really good stuff. Mm-hmm. And so for me, on a performance side of things, with athletes, helping them get in touch with that and understand. It's like reading a defensive back, reading the energy of a receiver to know about the nuance of a move, or stay versus back off, and that adds a whole other aspect to being able to be a better coach. Now, in a couple minutes here, we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to have a little break, but I want to end this on. As a mom, what's your viewpoint now about what you're going to say and do with your kids to educate and enlighten them about cuddling and the communication around that? Because they have no filters.
They don't.
They freely hug and and kiss and and play and stuff. So as they grow older, and they get, regretfully, some more filters, how are you going to help them?
So we practice at home. I do have 2 kids.
Yeah.
I have a boy and a girl, and we practice this stuff at home all the time. It's not every day because kids are kids, and I don't want to overwhelm them with personal growth stuff, but I ask them questions that are specific and make sure they tell me yes or no. And I set the example by not saying maybe and letting them know when something's a yes and something's a no.
So language is an important part of the conversation with them.
Yeah. And the other thing I do is I make sure they witness me having emotions. And
All emotions, or just certain good emotions?
All emotions.
Okay.
They witness when I'm in anger. They witness when I'm crying and I'm sad, which is a lot of times when I'm angry. They witness me getting it out physically and how to get it out of my body.
Yeah.
And when I'm done, they always want to be in the room with me when it's happening. They don't leave anymore. They actually never have. Once I was able to show them that I have emotions, it allowed them to have emotions.
Yeah.
And like my son will come, and when I'm done and I'm just sitting there crying, or I'm just kind of breathing at the end, he'll come and he'll just put his hand on my back and just sit there. And he doesn't try to fix anything. He just sits there.
That's a good response.
He's not scared of a woman's emotions.
It sounds like you created a pretty well-informed and safe environment for them. I mean, that one would hope that that's the case in every family,
right,
regardless of what you're doing. But that deals with, and we'll talk more about this on the skill side of things in our next segment, about managing emotions and strategy you use, and the kind of, even down to the how, do you have them sitting down or standing up, or when you talk to them, is it, I'm going to assume eye contact, and all kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that in the skill segment, but I want to take a little bit of a breath here and have you share with people, how do they get in touch with you?
Sure.
If they want to know more.
Sure. So I have a website. It's a web page. It's called bitetheapplenow/RSVP, or bitetheapplenow.com/RSVP. And just know there is a video on there that is not safe for work.
Yeah.
But the general web page is. So as long as you're not clicking on the video at work in the middle of a room full of people,
yeah,
you're good to go.
Good. Awesome. And let me remind everybody that you can add comments to 360mindset.com, share your opinions with me about the show, about future shows. Also, be aware that we're on Facebook right now, Facebook Live, KUHS.com, on our Facebook page. Send your comments in. Share them with us. Let us know what you're thinking. Right now, we might be able to make a remark to that as we're going through the show. In fact, I'll pick up my phone and put on the Facebook page so I don't miss that. So please, by all means, come and share with us any of your thoughts about what we're talking about today. And we're on 360 Performance Talk at KUHSdenver.com. I'm here with Jenny Adams. She is the founder of Access Granted. And we're about to get into segment number 2 on skills. You know, the things that we use to help us maintain a mindset that allows us to perform at our best. And today's theme is about abuses. So it's kind of like the performance to counteract not so good stuff. So what are some things that you've tried yourself, or you would recommend to people, to when you're kind of overwhelmed with what the world is throwing at you in a negative way? What are some things you do to get yourself back to center and back to that place where you can optimize your performance and what you're doing?
Sure, and it's different for men than women, so I'm going to tell you mine, which are mostly feminine related.
That makes sense.
And it's interesting because most women are taught to use the men's version of this, and they don't work for women.
That would make sense too.
There are some universal ones, like having gratitude every day and making sure you're saying gratitudes.
Give me an example of a gratitude. Not that I'm stupid and don't know what they are.
One would be, I'm so thankful today to be here speaking to the world and getting my message out there.
Cool. All right. That's a good example.
But it could be anything.
By the way, it's on KUHSdenver.com. Just so.
It could be anything, like I'm grateful to have shoes. It could be anything. Wherever you're starting from is a good place.
That's a good one to start off with. Any others that you would recommend?
Breathing is huge. At the beginning, I did a lot of hypnosis where it would teach me how to breathe while I was falling asleep. And now I don't even have to think about it. I just breathe all the time in the way I'm supposed to. Gotcha.
So that would, now does that, when you're in a situation where it's getting a little bit too, it's uncomfortable. You're feeling kind of antsy. The emotions, you feel the emotions kind of bubbling, whether it's fear or anger or a combination of that. But then after that, I mean, that's the immediate place where breathing might be helpful right away, visualizing something a bit more positive so that you don't focus on what's happening right there in the moment. But after that happens and you're still left with the thinking, is there anything different
Yes.
you would do?
When I'm still thinking about it, I usually have to get this out physically.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a whole room in my house where I have a punching bag and bats and pillows, and my kids and I do this together. Sometimes we do it separately.
Yeah.
Screaming and yelling and beating the crap out of this punching bag, and just getting out all those emotions physically is so important. And then coming out of that, I get back into my body by taking feathers and rubbing them all over from my head to my toe, on my face, everywhere. I dance to sensual music. And
so you actually use your own emotions, like you feel the anger inside of you, get it out through those physical.
Get it out fast.
So punching, hitting stuff, and then you bring the other side, the other awareness of your emotions by using much more cognitive, softer, smoother, which then goes to the sensuality side of things. Positives as a global feeling.
Right.
And I would imagine that's the amount and the type of moving to a positive place would vary from person to person.
Exactly.
Like for me, I love the feeling of that. Those really soft blankets, and just kind of going, autistic. Or I can hug myself and get all cuddly. Those feelings where you touch the cold sheets, those kind of feelings. So it could be temperature as well as the sensitivity of the skin. But in general, feel
and get into your body.
Yeah.
And when my kids used to be younger and I couldn't quite teach them in the same way I do now, I would just take my hand from the top of their head down to their back as they were breathing and getting their emotions out, so I could connect their head to their body and get them back in their body fast.
How does that help? Did you have an experience where you would do that after they were kind of in a little bit of a fit? Like, I don't want to do what you're asking me to, so I'm just going to kick my feet and get really loud. Like, I used to have bib overhauls. I would grab them by the hands. They were easy to grab them. Especially my son. So those are really great ways to get the skill set. Now I'm gonna remind everybody, we've talked about breathing a lot, and we also talk about not so much a hypnotic state, but using meditation in what would be considered the non-traditional ways. Because most people think of meditation like you got to sit quietly in a dark room with a lot of smelly stuff going on. That's not true.
Well, and meditation silently is masculine.
Exactly.
And that's not right for women. We still meditate, but the way women would do it, the way I do it, is I dance and move and get into that feeling of the emotion, whatever that emotion is, and I move my body, and it may be, men are more symmetrical and strong.
You can say it. You can say it.
Straight, rigid. Structured.
Yeah.
And women are more moving and asymmetrical, and so when we're moving, we feel more like ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're always taught to sit and be in a masculine pose when we're meditating, which is not the best.
Yeah, is that the lotus or half lotus? I'm sorry. I'm not diminishing the traditional thoughts of meditation. You're absolutely right. It's more of a masculine premise that it comes to it. But the feminine side is, in different degrees, men can be in touch with that. And wide receivers are an example for me, or pitchers with baseball are the two places that I ask them to. And here's the thing. It's difficult for me to get them to engage with me if I use the word feminine. But I heard the other day that 2018, the big word is feminism. Feminism is a big word for 2018.
And we all have a different perspective on what that means.
Exactly. So I'm trying to get just a realization of a perspective with the guys I deal with. So like a pitcher, trying to find that touch on the release point when they throw the ball, and that they let it go at a place. They're accelerating really fast, and then they let it go. Or the defensive guys. Like we talk about tackling, feeling yourself, being in that right technical execution of the position, but when you let it go, power goes right through. And those concepts are universal. I work with martial arts, and there's the Chinese word po, which is through the obstacle. You've got your po, you're coming from your center and going through it. So this is, this is a conversation about getting in touch with who you are inside, and the skills you use to do that will vary, as you said. but I'm going to encourage guys to get more mobile with their movement.
Yeah, and the masculine and feminine, everyone has both energies.
Yeah.
But what we're taught with feminism is that women need to be more masculine because being feminine is not safe. And then when we get into the workspace, the equality takes us further into the masculinity as women.
Yeah.
And it brings men into the femininity, and everyone becomes equal, which creates no attraction. So just imagine that the ends are on the ends of a magnet.
Yeah.
And masculine's on one end, feminine's on the other. The attraction's from the outside. And so everybody's on that scale somewhere, but the attraction happens when there's two people happening, masculine and feminine. I had to be masculine to get here today. I had to plan. I had to take action. I had to do things to get here today.
Yeah.
But my main mode of operation is the feminine.
Well, we're gonna bridge into our next segment on mental conditioning, which is the environment stuff. And I'm gonna have you go back in time to when you were in a plant and you were the head honcho.
Yeah.
You know, masculine terminology, dealing with men that answer to you in your space, and talk about how that experience, or that at least acknowledgement of that existence of that space, can help both men and women understand their place.
Absolutely.
And then optimize themselves in those spaces. So before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about human desires. On my website, 360mindset.com, take a look at the RMP tab. That's where we have a personal assessment tool that is out there. I use it routinely with every client that I deal with because it helps me measure in scientific terms who this person is. Now, that's not in replacement of what we're talking about here. Everybody as an individual needs to get in touch with themselves at a deeper level. This measurement tool uses scientific techniques to validate and remove bias in its measurement about who are you? Why are you in this space? So it gives us a quick shot in real scientific terms with probabilities that are very, very high to be able to rely on the data. And that's called the RMP assessment. It's on my website, 360mindset.com. Please check it out, or sign up to talk to me. Anybody that's a new person that's interested in my services, I give out a 30-minute free session to talk to you. So sign up for your session on my website at 360mindset.com. We are here with Jenny Adams. She is the founder of Access Granted, located anywhere it can happen.
That's right. It can happen anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're in our next segment on mental conditioning and talking about environments. Now, we know one of the items we're talking about is women in sports. The U.S. women gymnastics team that regretfully the Fantastic Five had some, and other gymnasts, not just them, but over 150 of women were violated by Dr. Lasser in his, he would call it service. I mean, he provided what was supposed to be a service, and didn't seem like it really helped a great deal other than himself. So that was in an environment. Well, how do you know that exists in the environment? Now the Michigan State University is on task. The president has resigned from her position there because of all the backlash about how could you not know this? So when you look at your past, Jenny, and you look at all the different environments you've been in, what would you, looking back at that, what would you like to have known so that you could have interpreted these environments better, so that it would have helped you, just been more positive, more supportive?
Yeah. I don't know if this answers your question directly, but it's the way I want to answer it.
Then that's what it should be.
So the reason that we have these issues in society at all is because there's a huge amount of sexual shame in the world, both from the women's perspective and the men's perspective. Women are sluts if they enjoy sex or have sex with more than one person. Men are perverts if they think about sex or want to have sex or think that woman's beautiful and imagine having sex with her. they're even bigger perverts if they say it out loud. Women are even more slutty if they actually sleep with, tons of men.
Yep.
Talk about it, whatever. All of that is creating that environment.
Yep.
And you asked how people know if that environment exists in their environment. It exists.
But then there's the denial.
It just exists. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And whether it's tiny or if it's big, it's still there because women are shut down around their sexuality. We're not allowed to be sexual. And that's one of the things we'll talk about soon is that how I moved from allowing myself to be in shame around sexuality to owning it. And men need to be allowed to be sexual as well.
Mhm.
So women and men need to be allowed to be sexual. It needs to be a safe place so that people don't use their power. In this case, we live in a patriarchal society, so the men have the power. When men use their power, they haven't had an outlet for their sexual energy, so they use that power in a sexual way. Not all men, not the majority of men. And men aren't the enemy. It's just that society has taught this shame around sexuality, and when both sides can't be sexual, people do things they shouldn't do that cross the line.
So when should this edification, this delivery of knowledge, and then how much knowledge at what time and at the time we're going to deliver it? Should it be in early child? I mean,
early.
I mean, you're doing something as a mom
Yeah.
at home to help your kids understand who they are, their interactions with one another, and then do this. I mean, look, we have sex ed classes in school. I hesitate to even call them that.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing sexual about it.
No.
Because I've been in education.
Procreation and
Yeah.
how to be disease free.
Well, that, and then
That's
they get
about it.
drugs. We get drugs in there,
Mhm.
and controlled substances, and STDs, and all yada yada yada, and a little bit of anatomy. And everybody has. You're not all Barbie dolls.
Right.
You have parts, and then you get your chuckles from the kids, and then they go find out on their own.
Mhm.
And that's all great and wonderful. And as a farm kid, I was raised on the farm. So you see it as part of just daily chores, and you ask questions of mom and dad, and it gets a perspective. And then I had, medical. My grandfather was a doctor, and I had nursing. So there's a lot of input that I had that other kids didn't have. So now, as an adult and a father and a grandfather, I'd say, wait a minute, this is, to your point, this is why we have the shame around it. And taking all of the implications and mores that are provided through religious contact,
Mhm.
I'm just talking about real life, real times, because I know I have had more conversations with athletes at both amateur and professional levels about these things. Because some of these young men are shamed themselves.
Yeah.
Because they have this prowess thing that they get in the locker room about, fish stories about this and that. And I go, guys, you are who you are. And if you really know about what the body's all about, the woman's body adapts to the man. That's just the way it is. That's the physical truth of it. So you don't have to worry about your size or your prowess. It's going to be real for you with that person as long as you're genuine with it. I need water. As long as you're genuine with them. And so in the environment these guys find themselves in, all these thoughts go through their heads. And because I'm a father of a daughter, I have some insights about what a daughter says, but I have to be quite honest. I didn't know everything I needed to know. In some cases, I was a bad dad because I didn't share with her any perspectives because I didn't think I was supposed to.
Yeah, well, and you probably had the shame around it too.
Well, yeah.
And I used to as well, and it took me a lot of training and research and courage to be able to tell my children any of this.
Are you finding that there is a greater awareness by moms? Is it growing? Do we need
it's
more?
It's growing, but it's still tiny.
Yeah.
There's so much shame, and that shame, it's mind-boggling what it does to the planet. That shame.
I think we're getting a sense of it.
Yeah, it brings everyone down, and it's all related.
So where do you think the education, the insights are going to come from?
Each person needs to go deep inside themselves because even as a mother, I couldn't teach my kids what I teach them without having taught myself and
Yeah.
looked inside myself and become in love with everything about me.
So where does a mom and dad, or a mom or a dad, I mean, I hate to say Google it. Let's Google it. But are there places that you know of, or are there words and phrases they should be looking at to find more information about how to get more in touch with themselves so they can be a better educator of their kids, but first being an educator of themselves?
Yeah, it's going to depend on each person because each person has shame around different things.
Yeah.
Most people have sexual shame, whether they admit it or not.
Mhm.
There's shame there. For women, I would definitely suggest Mama Gina's School, the Womenly Arts. It's an amazing
And you
place.
said that's in New York, right?
New York City. And for men, they can contact me with Access Granted. I help men with that a lot. There's not a ton of information out there for men because men don't buy it.
Yeah.
And so those businesses don't exist because there aren't any customers.
That's probably why Playboy exists.
Right.
I just read it for the story, just the stories. And you know, I say it with a tongue in cheek a little bit, but that's what I hear back from the men and boys. You know, some are still, even though they're in their upper teens, men and boys. That's one of the sources they use to get insights on things. Or they, you know, again, the locker room talk. You know, we've had that phrase thrown at us the last 2 years about, oh, it's just locker room talk.
Right.
But it's not. It's real stuff that forms opinions and forms actions that aren't necessarily accurate in how they should deal with another, not just the opposite sex, but same sex as well. Because we know that sexual assault is not limited to just man on woman. It's man on man, woman on woman. And that, I think that awareness might be coming out a little bit by the way the NCAA is handling the definition of sexual assault and paring it down a little bit so that we take a different slice at it, so that it encompasses a deeper understanding of it's not just sensuality. It could be words you say, you know, the emotional abuse is not just, which could lead to sexual assault, but there's that emotional abuse as well.
I would say that we all sexually assault ourselves every day.
Give me an example of that. I'm intrigued by that.
Self-talk about the shame that, oh, I can't be a slut. I can't have sex. Oh my God, I can't talk out loud about.
Or I can't think that way.
I can't think that way. Just having that thought is I'm evil, I'm a pervert, I'm a slut. All of those thoughts are sexual assault on yourself. And it's when you don't love that part of yourself, that's when that is able to come out of you as physical sexual assault.
Well, and what it sounds like to me, what you're saying is that we are built the way we are. I mean, you know, whether you say it's God built me this way or nature or nurture, you know, that debate. But we are who we are. We have our parts. We have our orientation that we feel that's with us. Why can't we talk about that?
Right.
It is who I am. But you're right. Society has created a framework, be it right or wrong, that we're trying to filter our way through and understand. And I know that for me, I would rather be positive and moving forward with a positive thought than be mired with guilt and shame and repressing myself, because we know from a Dr. Lasser, something was repressed in him that he felt he had to act out with and abuse and or in some cases sexually assault these young women and the USA gymnastics team. And I hope that we go, as the young ladies have said, Allie Rassman, she said it on Good Morning America in the other interview she had about, she hopes it's a step towards resolution and getting things changed so this doesn't happen.
Yeah, we have to move towards away from anger.
Oh yeah.
Because right now men are getting the message that they're wrong and they're bad, which adds to the shame and the it's adding to it on the male side. Until society can help men understand how to do it right. Yeah. Because you are right. It's there in you. Yeah. Just no one has taught anybody.
You just have to find it.
How to own it. Once we own it and we know it's okay to be a pervert. I can have these thoughts. Perversion is fine. We all are perverts.
Well, and you know, maybe finding a different word, because that is such an old word that brings connotations to people's minds that are very negative.
Well, I had to go through this with slut. So
Yeah, yeah.
I have been slut shamed for many, many years before I was even sexually active.
I bet there's a lot of women and girls in that place.
Yeah. So one of the tools I've used to get this personal growth that I've had is called shadow work, and it's about going inside yourself and looking at the shadows that you don't want other people to see.
Yeah.
And being a slut was one of them. I've always been a sexual person, but I've always repressed it because it was shameful. No one wanted me to talk about it, but then I got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I went and did shadow work, and I did shadow work on being a slut.
Yeah.
And in that shadow, you ask your shadow to come to the garden, into your own garden. And it's you asking your inner self to come to the garden where you're safe. And when she showed up, she was Eve. I was Eve. And I was naked, and I was, and she told me that my sluttiness is my greatness.
I'm glad you said that, because that bridges us into our next segment, which is performance results.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about spirituality and that feelings you have inside of you, and to talk about that everybody's different. That you have yours, and you have the courage to share it and want to help other people find theirs, but they're all different.
Right.
Whether you want to take a mystic look at it and say, what's the color of my light? Or you're more conservative in your spiritual approach to it, and you say, I'm just a nice person. I like to be hugged. Whatever it is, at whatever level you're at, don't bring shame into the equation, or slut or perversion. I'm hoping we can get to different words that, not necessarily in our conversation, but eventually, that represent a positive. Because then I know from what I do with athletes and elite performers, I'll get to what, I don't know if I'll ever get to a pure elite level of optimizing, because that's just perfection.
Right.
But we talk about in kind of jaded terminology about what perfection is. And there's differences in my athletes. Some are more aggressive than others. Some are more violent in that aggressive tendency. And many times it's stay in the moment. Don't let it explode outside of who you are. I mean, look at in the Broncos, they have guys like Aqib Talib that gets, he punches people, rips their necklaces off and stuff. I said, well, what could you have done with that energy in an effort to tackle somebody, or in an effort to really defend well? Mm-hmm. Well, that takes control. That takes practice of that control. And I'm using different terminology than you are, but the essence is the same. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to come back to a situation that James Franco, he made some comments about when he heard about the Me Too thing and Time's Up and all that. He said, I understand that, or I think I understand it. So he made some comments, and then all of a sudden he got barraged with tweets about, no, hold on, you're a violator. You did this, you did this, you did this. Mm-hmm. And he goes, hold on a minute. I'll take responsibility for that, but just tell me what I did. Exactly. I don't think I did anything that was perverted or offensive. And goes to our point about understanding and knowledge. And he may not have thought he did anything perverted, but he might have.
Everyone's definition is different.
Exactly.
And I've learned that my definition still offends people, and I don't care. Anymore.
Well, yeah, I think it's not part of the results we're trying to get. Yeah. A performance result is that you have a sense of who you are, that you just don't care.
I don't care.
I'm delivering myself to the world in a way that's good for me first.
Yes.
I tell the mantra I give my athletes is, it's all about you. Mm-hmm. It's all about you. Well, they replace it and say, all about me. So, but at any rate, their focus is on them. But I say to them, do it in a way that's self-aware, not selfish.
Yeah.
Because you shouldn't care. But if you don't care and you're selfish in that not caring, that's kind of abusive.
If you're hurting someone
exactly
on purpose.
Yeah.
Which is different. I've also done shadow work on being a perpetrator.
Okay.
And I'm okay with being a perpetrator now.
Yeah.
And I can tell you things that you might get upset about, because I'm okay being a perpetrator.
Yeah.
Because I know that me saying it's going to open your mind, and it's for the good. Now, if I was being a perpetrator on a little kid sexually, that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that difference of hurting other people that can't defend themselves is one thing, but me saying something to you in a perpetrator type of way as an adult to make you think differently is totally different.
So what we're also saying is that there in the world there's still good and evil, right and wrong.
We're all good and evil.
Yeah, and we manage that according to what our purpose and our intent is.
Yes.
And that can create really great results or not so great results. But many times the definition of whether it was good or not good is based on who you applied it to. And the circumstances. So that in my athletic world, that's a win or a loss, or that's a tackle or not, or it's a pass received or a pass not received.
But you wouldn't tackle a child on the sideline.
Exactly. No, exactly. I wouldn't. I don't want to often. I don't want to throw them out the football in the stands, but it happens. So you're right. I mean, it's all. But we get so confusing about things because we try to hold it back and be the right thing at a time that somebody else subscribed for me. And I tell anybody I work with, I say, look, be you first with purpose and intent that represents who you are. And if you can get in touch with that, that's genuine. Now, that doesn't mean everybody likes it.
Do you want to hear how I got in touch with it?
Well,
you ready for that yet?
Not quite yet. But I want to ask you this question about emotional health, because this might get to your answer in a way that we can send out there. Is what kind of results do you have when you have that emotional health and that spiritual health for yourself?
I just feel it's more of a feeling than anything else, and it feels like I just keep going up to a higher cloud, and then I figure out what's there, and then I go to the next cloud, and then I keep going higher and higher, and it's like there's no end. It's just keeps going and
so
going.
So you don't feel any limitations?
No limitations. It is, and the further I push myself, the more I push myself out of my boundaries, the more uncomfortable I make myself, the further I go higher and higher, and it is so amazing. It's like floating on air.
Yeah. And do you have moments where you, like for me, every morning I wake up, I breathe. Every night before I go to bed, I breathe because I want to get into a really good positive place and centered and try to get as good a sleep as possible. So those are moments. I choose to go into these places. Are there moments where you choose to be in that get that spiritual and emotional balance for yourself?
Like throughout the day? Or type of moment?
Yeah, let me get like I said, mornings and nights for me.
I try to tune in all day as much as I can, and I'm going to use another word that some people are going to be offended by, and
a little stretch for them.
So
go for it.
I tune into my pussy because that's where my intuition is, and that's where I can feel if things are right or wrong. And for me, not for other people, but for me, when I'm thinking with my head, I think what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what society tells me. But when I tune into my pussy and my orgasm, I know what's right for me.
So with regard to getting in touch with yourself, is it something that you can say to other people, or what are the things you're trying to do to get so other people find their place? Like I know that there's zones and there's chakras, and there's all different kinds of groups that have different words for the same kind of centering and emotional wellness and spiritual wellness. The chakras are centered lights and they have colors. But what do you do to get to those places? We talked about breathing on the skill side, because part of the evolution for my segments is to go from mindset to connection with the skills, and then what environment am I in, so then I can pretty much prescribe what my performance results are.
Yeah, so that's a big answer. Like I could.
We have a couple of minutes.
Okay, I can't.
I know you can talk for days.
In a couple minutes, but the biggest point is to find your center, your power center. For women, it's likely going to be in their pussy. I shouldn't say likely. It is in their pussy. For men, it's somewhere. I'm still trying to articulate it. It's somewhere between their heart and their heads coming together. and their genitals at the same time. So
Yeah.
there's this link to it where women, ours is all lower. When men go there, I'm still trying to figure out if they've just been taught that that's where it's supposed to be, and so they go there and it's not right. They just don't know how to use it, or if it's connected at the top. I'm
Well, we
still
have a-
researching that.
We have a lot of, we have a lot of colloquial phrases
Mhm.
that are in the genre of locker room talk
Yeah.
about men and fill in the blank. Men think with their
Yeah.
and fill in the blank. And then you go to other groups outside of athletics and sports, and it's not quite set in that way.
Mhm.
I mean, as you know, the society gets hung up on words and
Yeah.
phrases. As you started to try to couch, and don't do that. You know, your use of words. It is what it is, and one of the things I've said from the beginning of my shows is I want to get to truths that help people be the best they can be. And in this area, of finding your spiritual self, your emotional self, and the health of that, and doing things that maintain that health, as you said, we've suppressed
Yes.
and shamed ourselves into not expanding our thinking. So as we get to the close here, which we are close to, I want to thank Jenny Adams for her participation and sharing. You have shared in such a great way for a subject that gets shamed.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I wanted to bridge to my audience about being the best performer you can be in what you are passionate about. And we have different passions, but that was the thrust of our show today. And we used abuse, the negative, the extreme crisis area that these young women went through. And I just feel for these young women that the focal point was the women gymnastics team. How much better could they have been if that hadn't happened to them?
Oh yeah.
You know, if we would have had an environment for them that was aware of not letting this happen.
Mhm.
I mean, we've allowed little girls to go away from home and live with other people and hope to whomever, God or whomever, that they're going to be safe. Well, apparently they didn't have all the criteria
Right.
to help them be safe. So thank you, Jenny, for sharing your thoughts. And our listeners and viewers on KUHSdenver.com, this was a great topic for us to talk about. We have come to the end of our time for today. And as usual, as I said when we started, you got to breathe. You got to make sure that you're ready to go and you're doing the right things. And as over my shoulder, we have Allie Rasmus on The View sharing her thoughts. Have a great day and a great weekend. Be aware of yourself and your center. This is Lowell Whiteman, your host of 360 Performance Talk on KUHSdenver.com.